extraordinary. We've seen it starting with the CTP hearings, going all the way through the budget hearings and on and on and on. It's sort of been a drumbeat. I actually joked when I testified on the budget, I think I was later in the panel, and I said something like, I think I got up and I said, I'll just say be more bus and sit down, because that was kind of the rhythm of the thing, honestly. There was a lot of that. And a lot of work has been done by a lot of people. I do realize that there are folks who think that's not enough, we're not doing enough, we should be doing more, the need is there, the Be More Bus blueprint is there, why aren't we doing more? And I think the answer is because there isn't very much money to spend. We had an extraordinary year last year due to the work of many people in this room and many others to get State of Good Repair going. And now we turn our attention to looking forward, and with Be More Bus probably being the most pressing thing. So like everyone, I would like to see as much money as possible put into MTA and specifically into Be More Bus. And I wish there were an opportunity to do more. I know that the administration and the secretary and the administrator are committed to moving us forward as quickly as possible. And I just want to acknowledge the effort that has been made by all the advocates, as well as the response from the secretary and the administration, as just reported by Holly, to take a step in the right direction. It was really important to us to maintain the momentum on the work that we're trying to do. And if last year's State of Good Repair effort was characterized by the then secretary and others as a down payment, which I think is accurate, I think that this year's commitment to Be More Bus with this enhancement should be fairly also characterized as a down payment on Be More Bus. And now we have to figure out, frankly, how to fund the rest of it. And my own attention, I'm just, as a chair of this commission and more broadly, is to really turn the corner here and start talking about funding for transportation, including transit, but transportation broadly in the state of Maryland. This was not the year for that conversation, but it's something that has been going on overtly and more quietly for a while. And I just think all of us need to start thinking about how we are going to identify a sort of responsible, viable, rational funding source for transportation and transit in the state. And I really hope and encourage everybody who has a voice in that to turn their attention to that as quickly as possible, so that we're not having a conversation about whether we can make a modest but critical investment in Be More Bus, but rather being able to fund it in a much more robust way. So I just wanted to contextualize that a little bit. I want to thank the secretary. The deputy secretary is here, sorry. So on behalf of the commission, I want to thank the secretary. I want to thank the governor and the governor's office for what I'm sure was their role as well in helping to move this in the right direction. And we just need to all pitch in and work together to keep this momentum going. So thank you. And I just wanted to provide a few comments around that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the secretary and the governor are committed to transit and advancing transit in Maryland. And I think this is a really important step towards advancing this project. So really excited to be the chair. Moving on to other kind of things that have happened since we last met, and knock on wood, we are not going to have any additional snow this year because we are all done with snow. Please, yes.
77 next week.
Yes, all of our county friends I know are probably thinking the same thing. But I did want to share just a little bit about MTA and the things that we did during snow operations, and a huge just shout out to the team. For the major storm that happened at the end of January, tons and tons of communication and planning beforehand goes into that to make sure that we understand who's doing what, that everyone has a good understanding of what to do. And so the team worked really hard there. Ton of coordination with MDOT, with all of our local jurisdictions, right? So we're hearing, hey, who you plowed? Where can we send our buses? Making sure that they know where the priorities are for us, where our buses get stuck, and so can plow those areas. We did have a representative in the Baltimore City Emergency Operations Center, so we were hearing directly from them, and happy as well for either Anne Arundel or Baltimore County in the future to do that. If that's something you guys are interested in. And then again, a huge shout out to the team, 0 weather related kind of accidents or safety injuries impacting our riders. So just like a huge kudos to the operators for being out there and doing it, for our recovery team, for when the buses got stuck, going out and rescuing them. A lot of effort went in there. And then our team as well pitched in to assist local jurisdictions with clearing shelters and bus stops. I think as an agency, we cleared a little over 400 bus stops to assist our local partners in that effort. We also celebrated Transit Equity Day. I think this is the 3rd or 4th year that we have been celebrating Transit Equity Day, which is Rosa Parks' birthday, with free transit. We do reserve a space on our buses and trains as a seat in honor of that important work that she did. We're also on our 3rd year of our Earth Day Youth Art Competition. So anyone who knows a student in ages 5 to 17 who is interested in submitting their art, we partner with the Maryland State Arts Council on this, Maryland Department of Education, they have judges who judge the art, and the winners get to go on a bus every year. It's always really fun to see those buses rolling around with the children's art. And to be honest, I'm very impressed with the quality of some of the art that these kids do. So if you know anyone who's interested, we are accepting applications through March 13th. And so I would encourage that submission. Kind of moving topics here. I did want to celebrate the team again. So our Charm Pass app, which is the mobile application that you can use to pay your fares. Historically on Metro, if you wanted to use it, you would have to go over to the station attendant booth, show the station attendant, and they would open the gate for you. Now you can scan the QR code at the gate itself, and the gate will open, which is a big improvement for riders. Makes it so they don't have to kind of go out of their way and wait, especially heavy times of the day. It's just kind of like a line gets it over at the station attendant booth. And again, I want to shout out the team. We're working on a longer term fare system replacement plan. It's going to be a while before we get new fare gates, but in the short term, they were able to do all this work in-house. So 3D printing and installation and the design was all done by our in-house team. So we saved a lot of time and money to make that happen. Wanted to also share some kind of planned service disruptions for us. So construction season starts now, basically. And we would like to take advantage of the weather to get as much construction done as we can. Our Program Management Oversight Office has a 5-year look ahead schedule where they look at all of our planned projects that affect service. And they do their best to kind of move things around so that we can do as many projects at the same time as possible to minimize our disruptions. That said, we still are going to have some disruptions, and so just wanted to share this information. We're trying to be more proactive about getting information out early on our website so that riders know as well. So in 2026, some of our service disruptions, actually next weekend in the Light Rail Central Business District, we're going to do single tracking between North Avenue and Camden to replace a broken rail. So this happened actually during the major snow event. There was a rail break. We were able to do a temporary fix, and this will be the permanent fix for that. In August, so this is pending that we get the contract in TP'd. It should be in April, but we're going to be doing some work on the south end of Light Rail in Anne Arundel County. And so we'll have a 33-day outage with shuttle bus service between North Linthicum and BWI and Caldwell. So we're replacing some grade crossings there, Maple Road and Twin Oaks, that we've got a lot of complaints about. And so I think the residents of Anne Arundel County will be thrilled to see that happen. And that has also been a ton of coordination because the crossing there ties to a light that State Highway maintains, and there's also county roadways. So a lot of coordination with the local jurisdiction and State Highway to make sure that that project can happen. And then later this fall, again, dates specifically to be confirmed, in the Light Rail Central Business District, the goal is to replace a aged fiber optic cable and complete some track repairs. So we'll have 2 weekend outages there. Those will be timed to avoid major events in downtown. And so that's always our goal when we're doing those. And then on the Metro side, this fall and winter, so with Hitachi, we do have the new rail cars, but there is some train control commissioning that needs to happen as we switch to the kind of final solution there. And so we may have some early closures, occasional weekend outages, and so we'll be sharing that information as we get closer. And again, I wanted to shout out and celebrate the team for some of our recent procurement milestones. we've had between the cybersecurity incident and the DBE interim final rule that was published right around the same time, some hiccups in procurement, but the team has, I think, really come through that and we're moving full steam ahead. And so we've had some great milestones recently. On the light rail modernization program, 3 of our 4 major contracts are in market. We've had strong vendor participation, a lot of feedback, and so are on track to make those happen. We advertised for the Raise East-West Phase 1, and so if you remember, that's across Baltimore City and into Baltimore County. Some bus bulbs, dedicated lanes, transit signal priority to speed up travel time on the East-West corridor. We advertised for our agency-wide elevator request for proposals. So a lot of our elevators are aging and need to be serviced, and so that was advertised as well. And as I mentioned, the guidance in the interim final rule is now in action. Couple of major upcoming milestones, the final light rail modernization program contract, which is for the Cromwell maintenance facility, will be advertised in April. Some of our ancillary construction, so those are just construction contracts that we can use for a variety of small things to allow us to respond more quickly, will be awarded in April and May, again, pending BPW approval. And we'll have 2 of our contracts for almost 200 ADA bus stop upgrades set to NTP in May. So a lot of work and the team is doing, again, focused on safe good repair, enhancements, and making sure we're maintaining the system. And that's all I got. I'm happy to take any questions.
For the administrator?
Thank you.
Holly, I'm sorry, I don't know what the constraints are, but can you say anything about the fatality that occurred at the shot tower station?
Yeah, I mean, the MTA police are investigating. Unfortunately, there was a person who fell into the tracks and was struck by a train. So, first responders came immediately, but unfortunately, the person did pass away. So MTA police are the lead investigative unit and will be continuing to investigate that incident. The operator who was impacted, I spoke with yesterday. She is shaken and doing okay, and so the agency is making sure she has the supports that she needs.
Yeah, well, please express our condolences where appropriate and our support for the operator. I'm sure that's very traumatic. But just something, and it does lead to one sort of policy question I'm curious about, because I did see that coverage. MTA police essentially are the investigatory unit. I've just never really thought about it. Maybe it's just an opportunity for you to explain a little bit.
Yeah, so we coordinate really closely with local jurisdiction police. So obviously here in the city with Baltimore City Police. Baltimore City Fire Department responded with EMTs, Baltimore City Police responded, as well as MTA Police responded to this incident. Each incident that happens, the jurisdiction and the police work together to determine like what makes the most sense for who to have the lead. So there's no one case that I could say it's always MTA or it's always Baltimore City, but in this case, they did determine that MTA Police will be the lead investigator. Unfortunately, we had a Mark fatality also a couple weeks ago. Someone walked in front of a train, really tragic incident. And so that one, again, we went back and forth. It was in Prince George's County, and they determined that MTA would be the lead, but it's always just a conversation between the jurisdiction.
And I assume it also leads to some sort of internal review regarding policies and practices.
Yep, we always take a look at, what happened with the operator, what happened with the station attendant. They do get sent down for drug and alcohol testing because that's the main policy and regulations. And we report as well to the State Safety Oversight Agency as well as the Federal Transit Administration.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, any other questions for the administrator from the commission?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
We acknowledge the administrator's enthusiasm for the Oreo. Wearing
Willing spring.
the right colors.
Amazing.
Yes, and willing spring forward.
While David is coming up, let me just say a couple quick things. I've spent enough time talking with David about TOD that I can't remember where I've seen him, including here at the commission. And I think you've been here once before, earlier, yeah, I thought so. But at a much earlier state in evolution of what you're about to hear. Don and I and others were involved during the O'Malley administration in sort of early TOD efforts in the state, and I'm sure others here were as well, looking around to see. And that was sort of TOD 1.0 in a way. We went to sort of TOD -4 for the ensuing 8 years for reasons that I've never totally understood. But we now have an exceptionally talented office at MDOT focused on TOD, and David, introduced himself, but Joe McAndrew and David and others. It's just such a no-brainer. It's complicated, but conceptually, as a threshold matter, it is such a no-brainer that we should be doing more with respect to TOD among many, many stations. Anne Arundel County, perhaps, is leading the charge with the announcements, and we can talk about that. I'm sure you'll cover it. But there are opportunities in all these jurisdictions, incredibly underutilized. So in terms of fulfilling the governor's mandate to the agencies and to the state to produce more housing, housing will be part of it, as I'm sure David will talk about, opportunities for walkable communities, and hopefully also opportunities to capture some value from the new development that can be used to benefit the system itself, and sort of becomes sort of a circle, a loop, where more transit creates more TOD creates more transit creates more TOD, and it's an upward spiral of sorts. So I'm really, really excited about the work that's being done there. David deserves an enormous amount of credit for it, and he'll explain to you that now they're about to release a very serious document that really will launch us, I think, into the next phase of all this. So with that brief introduction, Dave, please go ahead.
Well, thank you, Chairman Laurie. I appreciate that, and it's great to be back and brief the commission on a specific TOD effort. But I think to respond to some of the comments there, we do have a lot going on. We've got multiple joint development projects that are happening. Odenton, as you mentioned, is one of them. We're going to be announcing Bowie State in the spring. We're working on Reisterstown. We're obviously supporting our legacy joint developments at Owings Mills. We've also redefined the TOD designation program, which is really, we were kind of laughing about this yesterday. It's kind of blowing up. We've just awarded 3 new designations at the end of last year. We've got 3 new ones in the pipeline at Frederick, Rockville, and Cromwell. But there's a lot going on. But what I want to talk about specifically with you today is the Baltimore Regional TOD strategy, which is a very specific look at TOD in the Baltimore region, specifically around the Metro and Light Rail, which is something we are planning to release in the spring, and I'll get to more of that. Very briefly, to kind of reiterate some of the things we've talked about with the commission in the past, this is a very prominent state goal from the governor's office. It was reiterated in the 2024 state plan that named TOD specifically, not only in the traditional sense of generating ridership, but really identified TOD as a tool to help solve the state's housing and economic development challenges. So that is something we talk about quite a bit, in addition to providing access to transit and generating ridership. And TOD is a central focus of the governor's 2026 legislative agenda, which I'm sure many of you have either engaged on or have seen. The governor put forward a very specific bill, the Transit and Housing Opportunity Act of 2026, which we affectionately refer to as the TOD bill. That was has been introduced in the Senate and was introduced in the House earlier in the week, and is moving forward. And we think we'll be successful with that legislation as we have conversations on any proposed amendments and support for it. So a lot happening in that respect. Just to reiterate something we all know, TOD, what are MDOT's TOD objectives? Increase ridership through density and connectivity. It's actually defined in state law as what TOD should really be, the core of what TOD should be. But we want to maximize return on the state's transportation investments, which are critical, and there are significant investments being made in the Baltimore region for transit. We want to support long-term economic development, use as a tool to address the state's housing challenges, and support the development of transit-friendly communities, which I think is something akin to what the chairman was referring to in terms of TOD supports transit, which then brings more transit, which then brings more TOD, and we want to have these very accessible transit-friendly communities throughout the state. We're starting to assess all of the transit assets in the state to understand the opportunities. I think we all know that housing is a huge challenge for the state. There are many metrics out there on this, one of which is that Maryland needs over 120,000 additional units by 2030 to meet current demand. We're already 96,000 units deficient. So housing obviously is a huge piece of what we do. It's not the only piece, but it's a huge piece of the development we look at. We want to see significant return on investment. The state has, kind of writ large, has invested and plans on investing significant amounts of money in transit, both in Baltimore and in the DC area. And what really makes sense is to make sure that there's development happening around that transit to see the return on that. So that's a huge piece of what we talk about. And I think the piece to mention here is where we are in our assessments, the Mark Penn line, which I believe was the last time I was in front of the commission. We briefed you on some of the Mark Penn line strategy. We see almost 3,000 housing units being possible there, almost 800 million in state and local tax revenue. The Baltimore Metro and Light Rail opportunity, which is what I'll talk more about today. We see almost 5,000 housing units as a potential there. Almost 1.4 billion in state and local tax revenue. And then WMATA's got their own program as well, with achieving almost 11,000 housing units around their stations within the state. Okay, so the Baltimore Regional TOD strategy. This is some work that began almost 2 years ago, where we started looking at opportunities around the Metro and Light Rail systems to understand what are the TOD, what's the TOD potential. But through that, we kind of said, we need to get better alignment with our partners to be able to realize this. There is kind of, from previous history, some misconceptions about certain things like the TOD designation program, which we've now redefined. What are the financial tools that the state has versus what are the financial tools and responsibility that the jurisdictions have. And we wanted to spend some time with our local jurisdictional partners to talk about that and clarify and redefine how in pursuing these opportunities. So what this strategy is it assesses the opportunities and challenges to TOD in the region, and then lays out a framework whereby we can work together to achieve. It doesn't say we will just do this and we will just do that. It kind of looks at everything writ large and says, here are the opportunities, and here's, based on the characteristics of those different opportunities, here's how we can work together to achieve the development that we're looking for. There is significant investment being put into the Metro and Light Rail systems, almost 1.1 billion in the CTP. And it's important that we work together to see development around these systems so that we can realize a return on investment for that capital. And so that was an additional theme that we talked about. This was done through about 1.5 years worth of workshops. We had representatives from Baltimore City and Arundel County and Baltimore County. We had our state partners in MTA and SHA involved. We also had Commerce and DHCD involved as well. And really, we wanted to bring all of these parties together to say, here's how the state and local jurisdictions can work together. From an analytical standpoint, it looked at TOD opportunities in kind of two different realms. One was station areas, looking at that half-mile radius around stations. And then we looked at the state-owned land opportunities that we could realize through joint development. Additionally, identified necessary tools and roles, as I mentioned, for how to pursue those different opportunities. And one of the really important distinctions we wanted to raise was there's kind of TOD writ large in terms of the station areas where there may be a district around a station with redevelopment opportunities. There may be different parcels that might be underdeveloped. There might be vacancies. And that's kind of a broader conversation about how to do this type of development. And then there's joint development, which is the ability of the state to take its property, say Reisterstown in Northwest Baltimore, where we own 26 acres. We can take that to market, get a development partner, and develop it for transit-oriented development. Both of these types of approaches require partnership. And so we used this kind of this forum to talk about those different strategies to pursue that. I think one way to think about this is the TOD writ large piece is the market needs to come to the site. And for joint development, the state can take the site to the market. That's kind of the way to boil that down. So I know this is in your packet and there's a lot here, but we wanted to look at all the different opportunities. There's over 134 acres of state-owned land that are suitable for joint development in the region. We wanted to assess those and understand what are those types of opportunities. Kind of looking broader, there are broader opportunities, and basically what this represents are areas around transit stations that are underdeveloped or have significant amounts of vacancy. So we did a very high level analysis of that. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into developing these areas in terms of the local planning and community engagement, but we want to understand what are the development characteristics around these transit stops. And then we kind of did a ranking, but ranking is not the right word. We kind of did a kind of bucketing of different stations in terms of looking at what might be something that's driven by the market, what is something that could be a catalytic opportunity, what are sites that are a little bit more constrained that need investment before development can even occur. I think that was something we really wanted to talk about, not only at the state-owned land level, but also at the broader station.
Can you go back one slide, David? Sorry. So I think, obviously, we talk about all kinds of constraints in C, but I understand the concept of constraint. What's the distinction between A and B, pure market versus catalytic?
A means that there's a very strong real estate market there that could drive development. That's outside of any sort of zoning constraint, but it's more of there's a pretty strong market there that could drive development with a reduced amount of public investment. There's public investment needed for all of this, but at a reduced level. Group B is that the sites may be ready for development, but the market needs some help. And we wanted to classify those as catalytic opportunities because it's our view that once we get good development going there, it could change the market around those sites.
So is that another way of saying that A may need less public/state or local investment because the market is so strong, and B may need a little help from the public sector?
I think that's a
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand it.
And then group C was there was more than likely a constraint, a physical constraint to the development around that site. And these are the joint development sites or the state-owned land sites and how we looked at it. The station area looked very broader, looked at market, looked at underdevelopment or underutilized development, looked at vacancies, looked at connectivity issues. And so we did a very broader analysis on sites kind of agnostic to ownership, just so that we could have a conversation with our local jurisdictions about what these opportunities may be. And similarly, it was, the bucket A seemed like these things are more ripe, and the map here reflects those pieces being downtown. A little bit stronger markets, a little bit better connectivity. B similar in the middle, maybe a little softer markets, maybe needing some connectivity issues, but still opportunities. And C being more challenging and needing some additional action before they could start to support TOD development. And as goes without saying, we really analyzed a lot in this. So we really got into the weeds about what was going on. But I think takeaways are in Baltimore City, the city's done a great job in updating its comp plan and its zoning to support transit-oriented development. The markets are a little slower to develop, but again, we view that as a catalytic opportunity that once we get some things going, that market could turn around. Connectivity is generally good, particularly in the CBD. One other piece that I wanted to mention is that we also looked at at a high level, what are the infrastructure needs to spring these sites? Most sites would need replacement parking to some extent. We may need to invest in additional bus facilities, and we work very closely with MTA to define those issues. But there is some initial infrastructure investment that would need to occur to make these sites ready. And so we looked at those in Baltimore City, almost 60 million in infrastructure there. Baltimore County, the zoning is currently unsupportive, but the markets are stronger. Connectivity is marginal, and there's a little bit higher of an infrastructure need for some of those sites. Anne Arundel County, the zoning was in some sites was good, and some sites there was a kind of there was some misalignment in zoning, but it's kind of in the middle ground on that piece. The markets are stronger. Connectivity may be a challenge in some sites. And then there are 3 core joint development opportunities in need of almost 19 million in infrastructure. So again, this is not a ranking in terms of yes or no, and we won't do this or we will do this. This is just kind of laying out what those opportunities are and what are the things that we need to tackle to make things happen.
And
Yep.
The infrastructure costs there, are they transportation related only or?
Yeah, and that, yeah, there, I guess.
And are they, whose obligation is that to fund those?
I think
Do you know, is it a mix of like?
the development would not be able to fund that. We'd have to figure out the public sector funding to make this things happen.
Thank you.
And you, David, it's just about, in the actual report, you have a specific catalog of what makes up each of those infrastructure, that the infrastructure number in each of those,
Generally, yeah, I mean, it's mainly, replacement parking, moving bus facilities. We looked at different aspects, but it's very high level. As we pursue these sites in more specifics, we would really drill down on that, but this was the high level assessment of those sites.
thanks.
And then, we did a capacity analysis looking at future TOD opportunities. Again, the future TOD piece is very broad. It's looking at station areas and looking at, what might be possible for redevelopment, what might be vacant, and looking at the opportunity there. And of course, we looked at the state-owned sites and what are the potential there. But it's significant if you start to say collectively that we want to see density concentrated around our transit stations. There's very significant opportunity out there, both at a station level, at a station area level, and also at a state-owned land joint development level. Almost 6 million in new development, almost 5,000 housing units, as I mentioned, and then the associated retail and office opportunities. And again, these are high-level assessments. We just want to get a handle on what we think the opportunities are. Similarly, from a state and local tax revenue, we want to make sure that we're defining this. For the joint development piece, that's putting state-owned land that's not generating tax revenue now, putting that on the tax rolls to help support the local and state economic development. Again, very significant opportunities there. And then ridership, we made some general assumptions, working with the MTA team to understand, if we were to get, the basic levels of this type of development we want to see, what does that new ridership look like? And again, it's significant on both the metro and the light rail, and it's something we need to make sure that we're considering. And we went through kind of a strategic discussion with our jurisdictional partners and saying, in each instance, here's what needs to happen at your level in terms of aligning land use and planning to support TOD. Here are the financial tools that the local jurisdictions have versus what the state has that can be able to enable these things and cover some of these infrastructure costs that we mentioned. I think that's really important to keep in mind. I think from MDOT's standpoint specifically, we want to keep building these partnerships and keep having these conversations to align our local jurisdictional partners to supporting this. And then also, we have the opportunity to take sites to market, as I mentioned. And so we want to keep doing that, keep understanding what the needs are for those sites. And particularly along the metro, I think is a really important piece, is bringing those sites to market as catalytic investments to spur TOD in the region. Talked about tools, there's a lot out there. There's actually a lot of legislation pending in front of the General Assembly this year about this. But we needed to be clear on who can do what from a TIF standpoint. I think historically there's been some misconceptions that the state can levy a TIF. That's not entirely true. There's opportunity zones, there's enterprise zones. One of the things that we really talked about that I think is a great strategic element was the use of public institutions as an anchor. I think that can be a big driver to spurring development. So libraries, community centers, those types of uses that a local jurisdiction and the state can work together to make can really help drive TOD. And just, successfully accelerating JD and TD requires close coordination. We continue to work with our jurisdictional partners. And the one piece I want to mention here is it's really critical that we pull the private sector into this. And we've worked with GBC and others to make sure that they're in the loop. And we do plan on pulling those groups together for coordination forums once this plan is released so that we have the business community involved with this as well. So I guess let me stop there for just a second. The strategy document is very dense. I commend Chairman Maria because you read the whole thing because there's a lot of analysis and there's a lot of pieces in there. There's a lot of pieces in there, and I know many of the staff representatives from the jurisdictions, but have seen the document. But are there any questions about the high level overview I just gave?
I know this group and they will want to read the whole thing.
Okay.
I'm confident that you can
Today at law school.
Please.
Yeah, thanks. Two questions, I think. One, I was wondering whether there exist or could be created opportunities to incent local hiring and contracting as a part of this. I mean, since so much of the work is at stations where people could actually get to work by using transit to get to a job construction site, whether the state or the local governments as the holders of either land or money can create those incentives to support local hiring and contracting. And then secondly, was the one about OZs, because I know that the designations are coming up like in a couple of months. And I would assume most of those will be in Baltimore City. I mean, for the state to be able to identify OZ sites.
As I understand that process, the local jurisdictions recommend to the state, and actually we've been engaging the local economic development agencies to help coordinate, if those opportunities can be applied to TOD sites because they can be very effective. And so we'll continue those conversations and also work with Commerce when they come up, I believe later in the year.
All right. And the first question?
The first question, I think, the joint development agreements, I think present a great opportunity for the element you're talking about. I think where that opportunity lies is with the implementation of the infrastructure. If we go to build a new garage or if we go to build a new bus facility, I think that's where there's an opportunity to layer in the opportunity you're referring to, which is hiring local workers to do that work.
Yeah, I've got examples of like Hopkins doing this work, creating specific requirements around local hiring and contracting. We've done it in Baltimore City in places. We're working on it around the country. So if there's any opportunity to really advance that, because that's when we move from sort of economic development to economic opportunity. And that's where we start lifting up the people in the community to be able to be the beneficiaries of the development that's taking place.
Agree. I totally agree. Actually, I think somebody's got their hand up on that.
Hi, it's Lakey Boyd. I had a question that's also kind of a comment. Having worked in TOD in other states and structures, one of the questions I have that I don't expect you to answer today, but just an observation, because this office sits outside of the transit agency or department in this case, I'm used to seeing it, as a real estate office inside of transit. And I think the biggest observation or question I have is it's going to be critically important that transit investment continue at a pace as the development happens in order for it to be effective, right? Because frequency and consistency is what ridership actually starts to be transformational, which means we could do a development, and if the transit infrastructure does not continue an investment, then the experience is not what it is, and it draws from the ability to be catalytic. So I think everybody in this room knows that, but I think it's just an important observation as this really gets much more robust. So I'm really glad to see the progress, but I think that how that funding alignment works over time is going to become more of a potential, whether it's a formal integration or whether it's, I'm sure you work, well together. We've heard that, in previous presentations. But certainly just a concern I want to flag from a BRTC perspective.
Well, if you don't mind responding to that, I think you're absolutely right. And we've started to develop a lot of internal processes with Holly and her team at MTA, where we're literally documenting all of the transit needs of each site, both existing and future, of what the transit may need before we even go to market and get a development partner. And I think, the core of my team, we're all transit advocates, and the transit has to come first. So completely agree with what you're saying, and we've been working very well to get internal processes together to make sure that the transit and the future of the transit infrastructure is taken care of.
Great, happy to hear it. I think it's just exactly what you said. The deal structure has to reflect the ability for that to continue, whatever the source of funding is. So glad to hear it. Thank you.
David, I know there's as you mentioned, a lot of activity in this session otherwise about expansion of TIF authority, including, the idea of being able to use state revenues for TIF financing, which would be a new innovation, something people have talked about for a long time, instead of just local revenues, and a bunch of other things. But I am curious, does authority exist now to capture increment along TOD zones for purposes of investing in the transit itself? I just don't recall like whether that tool exists. It does.
Well, Odenton's a good example. The county enacted a TIF there that accumulated a significant amount of revenue, and they're building the parking facility there to enable the Odenton development in concert with the state. So yeah, the current law, and it may expand in the future depending on what happens with the session, but the current law allows that TIF revenue to be invested in the infrastructure, and it has to be.
But not directly in the transit facilities or transit, assets. Is that correct? I mean, I'm just curious.
Like the parking garage?
No, like
or
making funds available to
Platform replacement.
platforms.
I don't know why you wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
For-
not a lawyer, but I have to go back
A
and look.
little bit of the project if I can. Part of the reason that the TIF was used for the parking garage was it was acres of flat parking.
Yeah.
That was producing nothing other than cars. So in order to allow a TOD development, we had recognized there was quite a bit of transient people coming to that rail station. And you have to give them a place to park, but it needed to be vertical so that you could open up all of those other acres for development. But yes, post garage, it's entirely possible that those funds could be used for other investments like the platform or something else, capital infrastructure, but to the point of operating expenses, no.
No, I understand. Yeah, I wasn't going that far.
Okay.
Just trying to make
Yeah.
the capital circle a little bigger.
I don't see why a TIF couldn't be used to expand a bus facility or move a bus facility or do whatever that infrastructure investment is needed.
Thanks.
So really quickly, I wanted to touch on our next development solicitation because it's material to the strategy. We're wrapping up our Rogers Avenue TOD site strategy, which is how we go about preparing our sites for market. This is our next one at Rogers Avenue, which is along the metro, obviously. We're going to be taking the north parcel out to market for a solicitation. We think we can get almost 447 units of housing along there. We've been working very closely with the city on preparing that. And basically, what our strategy here is we want to release the regional TOD strategy with an event in April, and then at the same time release the solicitation. And I think the message there is a reflection of here's a strategy, here's how we want to move forward, and then we're going to move forward with action directly following that. So there'll be an event in April to do that. And then beyond that, as I mentioned, we want to start focusing on specific elements of the strategy, including with our private sector partners to start coordinating conversation and investment in our sites. And I left this picture of Odenton up because we want to be doing more of this, particularly in the Baltimore region. And we found that to be a really great event at Odenton, and we're looking forward to doing more of it around our metro and light rail.
Quick question. Is there any strategy around housing affordability?
Yeah, so two elements on that. We always defer to the local jurisdictions' affordability requirements as a baseline. So that's our starting point. And then we have an MOU and strategic relationship with DHCD where they prioritize their funding for our projects. And so we work with them to say, hey, here's the baseline requirement. Like for instance, at Odenton, it's 15% affordability, but we want to see more than that. And so DHCD can bring their funding to help us elevate the level of affordability. But getting mixed income communities is really critical to our work.
Is that affordability 80% AMI or below?
The MPDU, I believe, is 80%.
80%, and then there's a couple of other tiers.
Right. Any other questions?
Other questions for Dave? So you will be publishing the full document this spring?
In April.
In April? Okay, and then we'll sort of figure out whether it makes sense or how it makes sense for you to reconnect with folks here. And obviously the local jurisdictions are critical. And I know it is not through the lack of effort by the Baltimore County administration or the chief administrative officer that Baltimore County seems to be struggling a bit with this. It really is impressive. Anne Arundel, I think, has been sort of leading the pack And I think Prince George is soon to follow. The city, we've had some good meetings in the city, and I think the city is also really focusing on developing, and we will do whatever we can to work with the Baltimore County administration and others to try and accelerate the TOD opportunities that are there.
And I believe we were there with the governor to testify on the bill.
Terry Hickey was
I
there.
mean, we're trying to make some strides and balance our council and our administration.
And we appreciated that. Thank you.
Okay, anything else for David? Thank you. Thank you very much.
No,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it. Good
Appreciate it.
work.
Okay, in your package, there are 8 letters that we have had some correspondence with the General Assembly about various hearings, hearing testimony. The chair has been down to testify on these bills. This is the correspondence and message she's been sending. Those bills included the SB 389 and HB 894. That is the TOD, Transitory and Development Bill that the department had forwarded to the General Assembly. The chairman went down in support of that, and in your package is the testimony he offered. I don't know if you want to talk specifics, Mr. Chair.
Well, I mean, bill by bill, or is that or TOD, you mean?
Maybe for TOD, I don't know that.
No, I think it's sort of evident. I mean, we are, there are issues in the TOD bill and in that sort of legislation that relate to the balance of authority and power between the state and local governments and who, local land use control and so on. And I think that caused some issues, particularly last year. I think this year, my sense is that people have been working on this together from the beginning, and that there'll be a good outcome. I don't know exactly what the back and forth has been on the remaining issues, but I think the commission's view is reflected in the testimony, especially because of the way we're constituted, is to say that we think the policy is important, the state ought to pursue it. It's a good policy. We also recognize the local governments have certain prerogatives, and we encourage folks to work it out and work together. I think that's going to happen. I mean, can't say I have the last minute, and I'm certainly not going to have at the end of the day an impact on the final outcome. But I think it was important for us to be there to sort of continue to try and push it along in both ways. So that's really all there is on that. But happy to take questions, of course.
Okay, moving on. So another bill important bill that was testified on was House Bill 1081 and Senate Bill 947, which both are the Maryland Transit Administration Reform Act. We took a position of support of that. That is the bill that resulted from the workforce or working group that MDOT formed last year on reform issues at transit at MTA. Again, we took a position of support and the bill also included several provisions that go beyond the reform. The reform included tort liability. It's trying to align the agency with other state agencies regarding tort liability. It also it is enabling a quick take authority like SHA has for right of way and align some of MTA's procurement requirements with other modes to improve the procurement process and to make that faster for project delivery purposes. The bill reflected the report, the 517 or the work group's report faithfully. If there's anything you wanted to add.
Again, I don't want to be redundant. I think the commission has been briefed before on the 517 work group. We had to learn to stop calling it 517 because it was last year's bill, it was 517, and now of course it's 1081 and 947 in the Senate. But the bill, as Don said, is very true to what the work group recommended. It includes the creation, as the commission knows, but I'll just remind everybody for the public or others, creation of a core services board for MTA core service that would essentially supersede this commission, and also which has enhanced authority. It also creates an advisory board for commuter services, essentially MARC service, that would have less authority, but would be more than there is today, because there isn't really such a thing today at all. And then, so those are the two biggest changes, of course. And then, as Don mentioned, there are a number of things that have actually been priorities of this commission before that we pursued in the last session, including tort reform, including procurement reform, and other things, which this seemed like a good opportunity to get them on the table and hopefully get them passed. There are, Don mentioned them, but the tort reform, enhancing MTA's condemnation authority to allow it enhanced quick take authority, which I learned actually requires an amendment to the Maryland Constitution. Kind of bit of trivia for you: if the bill passes, that part of it remains subject to constitutional amendment by the voters. I don't know. We'll see how that process goes. And then there is also important language in there about we've talked about MTA, the state salary structure that makes it difficult for MTA to hire the level of professionals that it needs to do the sophisticated work that it does. And other modes in MTA, at MDOT, pardon me, have some additional authority to do that. There is a whole system of checks and balances. It's not a carte blanche to the secretary or to the administrator to hire folks, but it's an opportunity with appropriate approvals to essentially be able to hire outside the state's very rigid compensation system, so that we might be able to hire people who are frankly more expensive in-house, part of reducing reliance on outside consultants and so on, being more efficient to have full-time folks in-house. So those are the elements. I think you've heard all that before, but I guess it's worth reminding everybody for folks who might be listening or less up to date. But if you have questions for me or the administrator, I'm sure I'd be happy to take them. Deputy Secretary for that. So that the bill, the Senate hearing is today. The House hearing took place 2 weeks ago or so, a week ago.
We provided a letter of support for House Bill 1344. That is a bill that requires MTA to study all the locally operated transit systems in the state and look at cost share, ridership, historic costs, that sort of thing, and provide the General Assembly report at the end of the year. It does not have a cross file in the Senate. Like all the other bills, they're all in their own trajectory and are making their way through the General Assembly now. The chairman also provided testimony on MTA's budget at their budget hearings, both in the House and the Senate, about the commission and its concerns with the budget and its insight on some of the opportunities it provides, and that is outlined in the letters that you have. I don't know if anyone has specific questions about that, or if you have a specific.
I would just briefly say you should take a look at that if you haven't, only because it's a pretty good compact overview of what the commission has over time developed as kind of our main talking points and priorities. So, if you're looking for a kind of a quick summary of what priorities we've developed over time and our diagnosis of the issues, And those are the hearings that I described earlier in talking about Be More Bus, in the sense that there was a lot of focus, including in our testimony about Be More Bus, and a lot of focus on the need for additional revenues in the long term. So, feel free to take a look. If anybody has any questions about any of this, offline, feel free to reach out to Don or me, and happy to talk about it.
Just for clarification, all the bills we've been watching are on that list that I think was provided to you. Part of the meeting materials, and so there are 23 bills, counting crossovers, that we've been looking at regarding commission's work. We had moving on?
Yeah, I think so. If no one else-
We can move to the working groups, and we only had the lots group meet, and Mark, this is
Yeah, thanks, Chair and Don. Just wanted to say a special thank you to Don for presenting to us on the bills to watch, and Jake's ability to get our schedules together so we could actually meet back in February. So Don presented to the group the CTP, Consolidated Transportation Plan, and other bills to watch. A bunch of us that were available to meet that day remotely, we're all virtual, but Trey, Angelica, Scott, Luke, Don, and Jake, and Andrew. But the biggest CPT takeaway was that we reviewed, a lot of the lots funding, which is crossing over to that House Bill 1344, and the importance of what MTA can do for the lots, for transit in general. So we saw that Prince George's County was the major winner in the cycle with 260 million, heavily supported by the federal aid. Overall investments were uneven a bit and uncertain about the funding, remains still a bit of a risk. So whatever we can do to continue with the session, because I think the sign or die date is the 13th of April. So we're really getting really close. So keeping our priorities and our themes up front, keeping pressure on the basic stuff that we need to do. And Don presented the legislative list of bills to really watch. I think it's all in our packet that we really need to keep an eye on. And as we made mention, the MTA reform implications, if BRTC is restructured, dissolved, the lots work group could shift into MTA or stay as part of the BMC. And the BMC is required to study potential transit authority this coming December. But really appreciate Don being able to present us, and we had a bunch of questions and a lively conversation after which. So Don, did I miss anything, or do you want to add any more to that part?
We did produce a spreadsheet that we made available to the local governments.
Yes.
For projects that are within the CTP, so they can organize or review as they seem to want to.
Yeah. Again, thanks, Don and Jay.
Thank you. Continue to work by your group. Thank you, Marcus. You didn't mention the rider experience work, but I think we should at least update on that, including sort of coming attractions regarding presentation. So I'll turn it over to.
Sure. Thanks. So on the 28th, Chair and I, along with MTA, the mayor's office, Baltimore City Public Schools, and the City Council President's office, had a meeting to discuss the school access challenges that students were facing from the articles that were highlighted in the Baltimore Banner. And it was a productive first meeting. I would say that my takeaway from it was that it is much more complex an issue than you will take at face value. I likened it to be presented as a math issue, and it really is a calculus issue. As a person who went to an engineering school, I get this because the challenges that are being faced are multiple. One of the things we learned was that the school choice program actually has grown over time and expanded. At the same time, the number of city schools has increased, and the student dispersion has also increased. At the same time, MTA is dealing with service expansion areas, the geography of the service expansion area has increased, but the resources have not, as the chairman has said. And so there's a multiplicity of issues that are confronting and creating this challenge. And we're not dismissing any one as one being lesser than the other, but just acknowledging the fact that without, as the chairman said at the beginning of his comments this morning, without an increase in revenues, or without the advancement of the Be More Bus plan, we're going to be continually be challenged to address the issue. One of the things that was discussed though in the coming attraction is that we're going to, in May, we're going to be learning a little bit more, I think, from MTA about the work that's been going on. I think Holly mentioned at the January meeting, work on an MOU between the city schools and MTA, and things that might improve communication or awareness of how to address and deal with these issues. And we think, incremental steps are important steps, but the larger step is actually getting the resources to help address the multiplicity of issues. Students getting to school is really important, but people getting to work is also really important. And people being able to get to the doctor's appointments and things like that is also very important. So that's the calculus of the problem, but we also realize that the basic math is really, really important.
Thank you. Well, I was looking to see if Jimmy Rouse I thought Jimmy Rouse was on earlier, Robin, and if he's not, regardless, I want to say that the Banner, which has been reporting on this and in a way has stirred up a lot of interest, had a forum on this months and months ago. And there was everybody got to, the panelists spoke, and then people got to speak at the microphone. Robin, you were probably there. Mm-hmm. And everybody was like, it's so-and-so's issue, it's so-and-so's issue. And, people said it's MTAs, it's the schools, it's the cities, and it went around and around and around. And I swear the last speaker was Jimmy Rouse. And Jimmy Rouse got up there on behalf of Transit Choices or himself, and he said, I'll tell you what would make this problem, would solve this problem. If we had more resources and more funding for the system, everybody would benefit, including all the school kids that we've all been talking about. That really is, and it was sort of this, it was like this little light bulb moment. And it's so true. I mean, there are definitely things that I think can be done to make this situation better with existing resources, but they are relatively modest, a certain amount of nibbling around the edges. And we're gonna nibble, we're gonna do the best we can. And I was, MTA is everybody is working hard on this. People aren't ignoring it, but it's very frustrating. And the main issue is that the system is under-resourced. You can't fix this without really more robust service and frequency and all of the things that we've been talking about. So credit to Jimmy for his words of wisdom, pass it along. And we're just gonna keep at this. I don't want this commission to recede from this issue, because I think that it absolutely needs to be dealt with. And it is also one of the most compelling and frankly sympathetic reasons when we are arguing for more money and more resources, because everybody wants the kids to get to school on time. So, and I really want to thank Scott for his leadership. He's been great sort of helping to push this along, so we'll stick with it.
I'm just gonna say that this issue has been around for many, many, many years, but to hear that even a step is being taken to at least put an MOU as a start in place, I think it's probably a great move in the right direction. Yeah, because I know years ago you couldn't even get that much done. So
that's right.
It's baby steps, but it's progress.
Right, Don, anything else? Do we have any public
participation? No, we don't, unless anybody's looking to speak now or in the chat.
Anybody, last call for anybody either in the room or online who wishes to be heard for a couple of minutes? Well, we'll set a record here for the shortest meeting, but I'm sure we're averaging, we're trying to average down, because normally I feel like much longer. So if we could do that from time to time, that's great. Is there anything else from the commission? Any new business items or anything anybody wants to raise? Hearing none. Oh, Marcus, please.
Just reminding everyone that Transit Appreciation Day is coming up March 18th, right?
Thank you.
And we got a few things around our communities that we're acknowledging our transit frontline employees.
Great, terrific. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. We've been celebrating at MTA. We used to just try and jam it all in a week, and that was a very, very busy week for me as I go everywhere. So we're spreading it out over the month. So you should see some stuff on social media and definitely appreciate you guys kind of highlighting some of the important work that our employees are doing.
And you also, Ray, could you send the link to the MTA store, swag store around? I think I have a few of those items now. My wife's been wearing her MTA socks. So it's great stuff. It's fun and people really like to see it. Okay, so if nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you very much.